So the Latino population here in Texas has huge voting potential, but it's largely an untapped source for the electorate. How do you feel like when you were talking to Democratic leaders when you decided to pursue the lieutenant governor office? How did your background of being Hispanic come into play?
As a sixth-generation Texan, but as someone who has both grandmothers born in Mexico, I know that the fabric of Texas is so much of that multicultural, but I am Latina. I was very excited and thrilled. It would be historic to have the first Latina lieutenant governor in this state, but I think more than that, it is making sure that all people have the not intelligence, but the information that they need to go cast their ballots. Texas has many things to be proud of, but having the lowest voter participation rate pretty much in the country is not one of them. And that's not Democrat, Republican, or Latino vote. That's all of us. I'm excited because for the first time, we really are doing a very coordinated effort to get to those low propensity voters, those infrequent voters. And we know from other states' efforts, if you really target Latino populations using Spanish language media, and communicating with them, going into the neighborhoods, making those phone calls, they come out. It happens certainly in Nevada and Colorado. And I'm really thankful. I'm looking forward to this November.
So being a Latina helped you secure the party's nomination, you think?
A decision that our family made. And quite frankly, at this time last year, I was still not convinced. It wasn't that I wasn't convinced that I could do the job. I think I'm uniquely qualified as a small business owner, as certainly a legislator for 23 years, known to work across the aisle with people to get things done for Texas, to put Texas first. Nobody's ever said, Leticia, you're not qualified. I think what has held me back was we had a lot of personal tragedy in our family last year. And I, quite candidly, wasn't sure if my family could really embrace this, given the brutality of a statewide campaign. A lot of scripture, a lot of great people are joining in, and we see that momentum. So my family's all in, and I am really thrilled to have the ability to take this to the voters so they can see what a great contrast, particularly in this lieutenant governor's election, there is between Dan Patrick and Leticia Van de Putte.
You mentioned the tragedy in your family. I mean, it probably was a very difficult choice. Yes. Your father passed away. You had a grandchild that passed away.
Well, in May we lost our grandson, and it was probably one of the worst things that can happen to a family when you wake up and the baby doesn't. It was sudden infant death syndrome, and then a few weeks later, my dad died instantly in a traffic accident, but it didn't stop there. We had an employee at our small business that died in an accident, and a beloved uncle who really was my husband's mentor, and then my husband's mom. So really within a period of 4 months, we lost so much. And that's why there was the hesitancy. Not that I couldn't do this or that I couldn't convince people. And in fact, maybe it was all of those losses that helped our family understand when you lose so much, your priorities really get into focus. And hearing the lieutenant governor candidates, and particularly my opponent now, that is not the Texas that I see for my children who are grown and my grandchildren. It's not the Texas of opportunity, of a great public education system, of working together so that we've got a highway system that meets our needs and secure water supplies for the future. We've got a great state, but if you just govern by no, then that limits opportunities. And Texas is a can-do state. But we've got to invest in our children, our education system, and their ability to have training and education post-high school. And we've got to make sure that Texas businesses are on solid ground for the future by having that necessary infrastructure of water and highways and bridges.
You talk about your children. You have 6 children.
We have 6 children. Hey, all out of the house. They're all and on someone else's health care plan, so absolutely. That's real success. Pete and I are so blessed to have the 6 kids, and now 6 nearly perfect grandchildren.
I understand you and Pete also live pretty close to where you grew up.
About a block and a half, we made the move there. But it's a great neighborhood in inner city San Antonio, and we live in a house that was built in the 1920s, kind of a big house, but not anything fancy. But it's the neighborhood, it's where I grew up, and what I find on the campaign trail, that I am meeting Texans, and 201, they love where they live, and they love this state. They want to make sure that their leaders are accountable to them. That's why I'm having so much frustration in this campaign, because my opponent will only agree to one debate and he doesn't make his schedule private. The voters of this state deserve to know how this important position and the responsibility of a lieutenant governor, what the candidates are thinking on the issues. Respect the voters, and that's what I'm finding frustrating. Is my opponent is basically has been hiding for most of this campaign.
Your mother was a teacher, correct?
Yes.
When we talk about education system in Texas, we know that there were thousands of teacher jobs that were lost because of the education cuts that happened in 2011. How do we attract a teaching force knowing that that funding can be so volatile?
The real question on our public education system should be, how do we value teachers? We know that magic connection and that learning, that aha moment between student and teacher happens in the classroom. So yes, it is making sure that they have the resources, but teachers are spending hundreds of dollars buying supplies for their students. That's got to stop. And the high stakes nature of testing, got to get them off the backs of our students. Let teachers return to teaching the curriculum where they're free to teach and the students are free to learn. And I've learned that from teachers, but my mom's a retired teacher. My sister's a retired teacher, 31 years kindergarten. When I met my husband, Pete, he was a high school band director, and my brother-in-law is still a public school teacher. These are professionals who really are the motivators and the emphasis of our future workforce. How do we value teachers? That's the real question that we should be asking.
You mentioned testing. You've also called for possibly reducing the number of end-of-course exams. We have 5 in Texas
Yes.
right now.
Absolutely. It's the high-stakes nature of the test. We could do one exam. We have it already. It's called the Texas Success Initiative. And it's also used as a diagnostic so that teachers know they can administer it in the fall, see where those students are and how they move them to there. We can have an accountability system that does statistical testing. So yes, we would need the testing, but not so that it's so high stakes that it drives the system, that it robs our students of precious instructional time in the schools. Our teachers should be teaching the curriculum, not teaching the test. And right now, because of the high stakes nature, and yes, we've made great strides to lower it from 15 to 5, but it's still 5 high stakes exams. And what our little ones are going through, the high stakes nature, I mean, could you really be totally evaluated on your job performance on one 3-hour test given one day of the year? Our kids aren't standardized, and we shouldn't have this high stakes nature of those tests to figure that out. It's very punitive, and it's not working.
You've also called for a portion of the rainy day fund one time to help students go to community college in Texas.
Yes, we know that 55% of the jobs in 2020 will require a post-high school something. That's a certification program, a licensure, an associate's degree, or a 4-year diploma. Very different from when I graduated from high school in 1973. We've got the lusciousness of this golden age of oil and gas that is replenishing the rainy day fund. And even after the highway allocation monies are taken out, if the voters successfully pass that this November, and with the $2 billion from the water projects that were voted on last November, we'll still have $8.4 billion in that rainy day fund. Smart people know that in good times you make an investment. We could go to the voters with a one-time allocation from that rainy day fund, $2 billion that would work as a fund. We could use the proceeds from that to have every single qualified high school graduate to have 2 years at that community college or that certification program, that licensure program. Some of them are less than 2 years. It would be a one-time investment that could change a generation. The result of that, we would have a workforce that would be young and diverse and plentiful, but educated. And it would be, I think, a marvelous investment. And that's what our business leaders are also telling us. They need that qualified workforce.
And also part of your academic platform has dealt with veterans. I know you're the chairwoman of the Veterans Affairs Committee in the Senate, and your father was in the Army, correct?
That's right. The San Miguel family is so very like a lot of Texas families, with grandfathers and great uncles serving in World War II, in cousins in Vietnam, my dad during the Korean War. And even today, as we speak, my nephew is on yet another tour of duty in Afghanistan. We know that our veterans deserve the opportunities that they've earned, particularly in higher education. That was why I've been especially proud of the work that we've done on the Hazelwood Act, Hazelwood Legacy, of translating that college credit from the work experience that they get in the military. We call it college credit for heroes. So yes, I am very proud of the work that we have done for veterans so that they have that educational opportunity. It is something that has been a win-win, and I'm thankful for my colleagues. I know sometimes they have thought, oh, Leticia, here she comes again. She's asking for more for the veterans. But let's face it, I couldn't even be debating in the Senate and those House members in a system of representative democracy had it not been for the generation after generation of men and women who've served in our armed forces. They've earned it, and we ought to do everything we can to honor their service. And what better way than making sure that they have those opportunities for education.
With the military, we also have to think about the National Guard and also troopers that are down on the border. Obviously, this has been a big topic over the last year. You've also talked about making sure that the troopers have enough resources, but to catch the criminals down there, not the kids. How do you propose doing that, since the kids have been such a large part of the influx that we've seen over the last year at the border?
In May and June, we saw those pictures of the unaccompanied minors crossing the border. The fact of the matter is that border leaders from the business community, faith-based, and law enforcement will tell you this isn't anything new. What is new was the numbers. They were escaping horrific violence and the drug cartels in their own countries. I support our local leaders. They have asked for more help. They want more DPS. They want more Border Patrol, and we know that this administration has added 8,000, 500 more to be added to that Texas border between now and the next few months. But they also want help with their local police forces and their sheriffs. Instead of spending $18 million a month on National Guard, we really should have listened to those leaders first, helped them with sheriff's offices and police who can, by the way, arrest the folks that would want to sell drugs and smuggle human trafficking, and that we can help by helping our district attorney's offices there. They are so choked because the feds will love to take those high-profile drug cases, leaving our local counties, particularly those right inside the second layer of counties to the border, with a choked judge and prosecution because they don't have the resources. We could do that. We need to get tough. We need to secure that border, and we need to hold Washington, D.C. accountable and ask them for the money that we've spent. But instead of just having the harsh rhetoric and pointing guns at kids, that doesn't solve anything. Let's help those local communities with their law enforcement, and let's make sure that DPS has the equipment and the number of personnel it needs to do the job.
Obviously, this is going to be one of the biggest issues in the next legislative session. Talking about your legislative career and the decisions you've had to make, you've been in the Capitol since the 90s. I understand at one point you had considered a run for governor against Governor Perry, but you decided to run once again for your Senate seat. Why do you feel like, what's changed for you since that time of consideration to now? Why is now your time to take a statewide leadership role?
I think prior elections, good people, well-meaning people had approached me of, Leticia, you're known as a consensus builder. You understand the legislative process. You have a great history in the state and your family. Consider running statewide. And maybe thought about it. But at that time, my primary duties were to my children. Pete and I had 6 children in 9 years, and they were all under the age of 10 when I started in the legislature in 1991. Luckily, San Antonio not too far from the state capitol, and I owned my own business. I had pharmacy and medical clinic.
I heard you even had a crib in your office.
We had cribs in the office, absolutely. But the baby was just 18 months when I first got here. And by the way, that baby is 25 years old and 6'5.5", proud Aggie graduate. Our children now are all grown and they're having families of their own. And it's because Pete and I have been so blessed with the opportunities of this state, of a great public education system. The opportunity back then to be able to work and go to school, to college, and it was affordable, that we know that our commitment to this state is one of thanks. And I love being in the legislature. I love this state and working with people to find common ground of our greatest challenges. I know that I'm ready, and that's why this time we decided yes. In all honesty, part of the decision making for us and for me personally was, what if the Republican electorate selects my colleague? And I know that working with Dan, we try to find common ground, but his concept of not working with Democrats, of the my way or the highway mentality, of this really disrespect for the process, doesn't bode well for Texas. If we want that Washington, D.C. style of politics, yeah, I like Dan Patrick. But why would we infect the Texas approach where you work on both sides of the aisle? I mean, it's not about being on the red team or the blue team. We get to the Capitol, it should be about the red, white, and blue Lone Star team, putting Texas first. So in all honesty, part of my decision was, what if they do select Dan? We've worked together before, but his vision of this state is less. He would be the first politician and leader that would be in that position that would want to leave our children with less.
Let's say that it doesn't turn out in your favor in November. You're still going to be in the Senate because your term isn't up. Will that be awkward to have to work with Lieutenant Governor Patrick?
I can't visualize me being back at my desk. I really am working toward, and our momentum is really there. I'm having Republicans cross over and business leaders. I really see myself on that dais working with the other senators, working with the leaders in the House. If I fall short, I'm going to be there, still working. And I don't know if it would be awkward for Dan or not, but it would never be awkward for me to represent the people in my district. I'll do what I've always done, and that is treat people with respect, go by the rules, and keep us focused on the real priorities of this state, not the things that divide us, not to push to an us versus them. But we need to make sure that this state remains strong. And to do so, you can't afford to say, I'm not going to work with the other side. So I do so willingly, but I do so because I respect the people of this state. You don't have the luxury of holding grudges.